All right, recording. So, Lauren, thank you
Yay!
so much for being here with me.
Of
So,
course.
we have a mutual friend that put us in touch, and I was told you've got a pretty awesome story and that can be pretty inspiring. And I just wanted to give a chance to share that on my platform, hopefully inspire some other people like you've inspired me.
Cool. What is my story? Like, which story are we telling?
That's a good point too, because that happens to me a lot as well.
So our mutual friend is Ashley. She's one of the loves of my life. And she told me about you because something that my main passion in life is psychology, anything mental health related, like trying to figure myself out, trying to figure other people out.
What do you
And
think got you into that?
Really just going through my own issues. So I started, the first time I ever saw a therapist, I was probably 8. That was a strange experience. My mom was in the middle of getting a divorce and she was nervous that I would have some kind of issue with this. So she just put me with a therapist, and it just happened to be a therapist that would be on an SNL skit.
Oh no. So in trying
Just
to
a
preemptively
strange,
take care of any issues you may have, it's creating other issues altogether that are so niche.
yeah.
It's not like a ugh.
She was strange. She had a lighthouse obsession. I'll never forget that. There was hundreds of lighthouses in her office, and I was like, okay.
Did she ever
And
tie it
then
into a metaphor about life? It's like, well, you guys focus on this. This will be your lighthouse. Focus on your lighthouse.
literally,
Or is she just weird about giant phallic shaped buildings?
r-
Maybe it's
I'm
an
like,
internal.
you
Yeah,
should
okay.
figure out your Freud issues because something's happening here.
You're screaming right now.
So that was I don't really count that as therapy because it's not that I chose or
Well, it didn't
wanted
sound
to.
very therapeutic. So
No, it was so weird. It was just strange times. I think I only went once. I was like, yeah, no, on the divorce, I'm fine. Thank you so much. We're good over here.
do you think that kind of sparked something in you that drew you towards psychology too? Because for me, I was I always was just kind of drawn towards it, never knew why. And then I realized through studying other things, picking out patterns, once to the point I got to the point where I can kind of, I don't want to say psychoanalyze somebody, but I can at least pick up on vibes, so to speak, or
Yeah.
recognize certain behavior patterns, even if I don't consciously recognize it. When I got to that point, I'm like, oh, I'm trying to figure out everyone else to help me figure out myself.
Right. That experience, honestly, I'll write that off as who knows what. I don't think anything happened for me there. But what it did do is that it literally just put the word therapy in my mind, I think. It all of a sudden gave me an idea that there's a place you go if you want to feel better, maybe.
Yeah.
This lady obviously was not the one for me, but I think it planted a little baby seed. And then I went to my mom, and this time I went to her and was like, help. And that was when I was 11 or 12. And then after that, that's when my interest just sparked because it was so interesting to connect the dots of things and realize that things that happened when you were 3 are the reason you're still doing whatever now.
Mm-hmm.
And it just made me a deeper thinker. Instead of seeing someone on the surface and being like, that person is a real asshole, I'd be like, well, I wonder what their dad did to them, because I've been an asshole because of what my dad did to me. So
right, I am so much more understanding after having been an asshole due to stress and other outside stuff too, just draining me out. Now I see someone someone cuts me off in traffic, oh, of course do the initial, hey, what the fuck, asshole. Then right after that though, that I'm like, maybe he's having a bad day.
Yes, yeah, it makes you sometimes overly empathetic of others, because
yeah, I give people way too much slack a lot.
I was telling Ashley, and she's a very empathetic person also, and me and her were laughing. I don't know if you've seen or heard of the Netflix documentary about that man that killed his family in Colorado.
No.
So
no, I haven't.
It happened in 2018. You might remember the story. It was kind of a big deal. It became a big deal because he was a good looking normal guy. So for some reason that caught traction.
Was he the first hot mugshot guy?
He was one of them.
Okay.
And I think it was so weird because he was a normal dad, husband, very normal, very handsome.
Out of nowhere.
Yes. So Netflix just came out with the documentary, and me and Ashley watched it separately. And I was like, I'm such a fucking annoying bitch because I cried for him. Because I'm like, man, what happened to him that made him do that? Like, it's like sometimes my psychological empathy goes a little too far. I'm like, oh my God, that murderer, like, what happened to him?
Yeah. Well, I'll do that too. I'll be talking to people and like someone will be describing something terrible someone did to them. And I'll be thinking about like, well, what terrible thing happened to that first person that started this chain? Like, how far does that chain go? But then I also think like, well, some fucked up stuff's happened to me and I'm not a dick all the time. So like,
Right,
there's
I'm
a
not like a
balance.
killer.
There's a balance, like I'm not murdering anybody.
Right. Like I haven't gotten there yet, thankfully. So
right. So far we're doing fine. Oh yeah. Plus they'll find me immediately. My face is everywhere now. And by everywhere I mean like 20 downloads a week.
Solid.
Made it. Oh, I feel so famous.
We're on our way.
Doing so good.
So, but yeah, so Ashley kind of introduced you to me based on the idea that you were someone who dives into the same topics, which obviously you do. And one of my great mysteries of life that I'm determined to figure out is, and take this with a grain of salt, what the fuck is wrong with men? And so much of that has to do with how we have raised men and not allowed them to speak on these things. And obviously I'm overgeneralizing, but like men just have a real issue with self-awareness. Mm-hmm. So Ashley presented you as someone who like has been through shit, has had to self-reflect. And I'm like, that's beautiful. Then we're good already.
Well, I learned the hard way, like most of us do.
Yeah.
And but no, like when you said like, a big part of your life is figuring out what the fuck is wrong with men. A big part of my life is figuring out what the fuck is wrong with me. So it's
I'm women, and I'm like, well, we can talk about it.
Oh no, I know what's wrong with y'all. That's a whole nother podcast. We'll get to that one later. No, so well, it's. I mean, I hate using the term toxic masculinity because it gets so overused. But like the core concept there is correct. So a lot of times men are raised in a way where we don't talk about how we feel about stuff. If you're sad, suck it up. Go try harder. It's a very, very hyper masculine. I don't even know if masculine is the right word for it. It's a very, very hyper aggressive style of living. I mean, it probably harkens back to when you had to be hard to survive. When you grew up in like hunter-gatherer societies, you had to be able to be like, if you're hard crying, okay, sorry, it sucks, but if you don't do this, we won't eat,
Right.
So society's evolved so much faster than the human brain has. Of course, we're going to have some of this old tribal bullshit we got to deal with and sort out now. But we can be aware of it. Like there's plenty of times I can be walking down the road and I'll see someone, I'll think something and I'll be like, nope, that's monkey brain. Get the fuck up. It's 2020 now. Chill out. So you test yourself. I'm not some saint. I don't have bad thoughts or I think terrible things. Like no, I do all of that. It's just I just don't say it. I recognize like, okay, you're a garbage person sometimes, but every now and then you do cool stuff too.
But that already makes you less garbage because there's so many things that are ingrained in us or taught to us when we're young, or like you said, literally come from like an evolutionary place. But I think what I can judge character based off of is what you do with that. So like, for instance, we are going through such a time of racism and all these issues being brought up. And I talked about it on my podcast. Sometimes I have thoughts and I'm like, what? Excuse.
Yeah.
But I don't decide, oh, well, that's what I think. So yeah, that's what it must be. Like I stop my thoughts and I'm like, okay, you know where that comes from. You know who taught you that. Let's figure out how to rework that.
Right. Well, that's where like integrity comes into play, because like you can recognize like being a good person isn't not having bad thoughts or bad desires or any of that. It's about what you do with that.
Exactly.
So I might get cut off by a guy and be like, you're a piece of shit. And then I'll think, oh, okay, well, maybe he's having a bad day. Like my initial reaction still, it's okay to have that reaction. It's not okay to harm anyone or violate anyone's rights because of that gut reaction that may be based on ignorance or something else you don't fully understand.
Right.
So as long as you're just keeping your bullshit to yourself, then okay, live and let live a little bit.
But, yeah, and there's just men. Again, I hate overgeneralizing, but It's just, obviously, you and people like you are not included in this, but it's like, I've seen a lot of men that just are truly not thoughtful, and they don't like enter a higher realm of thinking. But they're
Yeah.
not doing anything maliciously. They're just like kind of floating along, not really questioning anything, not really. And then for someone who has anxiety to try to understand someone who simply doesn't have thoughts, I'm like, how could that be? Because I'm like, I mean, my brain is like on overdrive all the time. So I'm like, what is happening?
Yeah. So the issue a lot of times is, in a very broad sense, I found that like when it comes to situation or personalities, women tend to be, they're kind of reaching out emotion feelers in all directions. Dudes are usually kind of laser focused on whatever they're doing. And we're typically, a lot of us, I mean, I'm generalizing again, but like me and my friends, at least anecdotally, a lot of us were raised in a context of, okay, well, you have to do this to succeed. You do this, you do this, you do this. It's all about me as an individual. We're not taught a whole lot. A lot of our emphasis on being raised isn't necessarily how to treat other people as peers. A lot of us get taught, I mean, usually the good behavior reinforcement comes so you can, find a wife or find a partner. You treat people this way so that they will like you, essentially. And some of them,
Right.
I don't want to generalize, a lot of like people I know, just this, that's the polite thing to do. But at the end of the day, it's kind of evolved from this is how you get a mate. And of course I'm generalizing a lot, but I think that's what, at least for me, that was, I can't blame my parents at all. My parents are fantastic. I probably have like an evolutionary little tick where I have to be kind of a selfish dick sometimes, but no, they were all great. But sometimes we just get really focused on climbing a certain hierarchical ladder, and then we forget that everyone else is trying to go up their own too, and we can help each other by climbing together instead of race to the top.
Right. Now, question. When you say your parents were they great in an emotional sense? Did they push those like typical male ideas onto you, which again does not make them bad or anything? Like, sometimes I think it's just so normal to like raise children a certain way and to speak a certain way. So like,
Mm-hmm.
when you say they were great, what does that mean to you?
So when I say they're great, it means that's they were working with, my dad especially was working with a big disadvantage, like an absentee father, wasn't good when he was around necessarily. So there's a lot of issues with that family dynamic there. And considering that he was out on his own at a very, very young age, that so like he did very, very good breaking chains that had been cycling in his family for a long time. Now, some of those echoes are still going to sneak through. So, in some senses, because he never was someone that was taught how to, I can't even say that because he's one of the most polite, like nice people I know. He wasn't really taught how to like talk about your feelings and how you do stuff. It was all okay. Well, you feel bad, will work. Productivity is what makes you happy. If you can look back and say,
Right.
well, I did all of this work, then that must prove I got value, and not so much, based on who you are as a person. I mean, it's a great like seeing the evolution of like from where like looking back, I can see the starting point may have been to where he's at now. He's like a whole different man. I love it for it. And yeah, so with my mom, I didn't really have any big mental issues until my motorcycle accident when I was 20. And by that time, my mom is very, very religious. Most of my family is Christian. And at that point, I was questioning a lot. So when I started having some mental stuff, and I was questioning religion and everything else, which definitely played a part of it. The answer was typically, oh, well, pray about it or go talk to God about it. I'm like, well, that's the issue. Like, I'm trying to figure out if homeboy's there or not.
Right. I
So,
don't even know what
so
God is, and now I'm having to pray to him. Yeah.
right. So my grandma ended up being someone that I would lean on very heavily, even though she's of course very religious as well. She understood like what I was struggling with, having been a religious woman who had her own struggles, and she came out on the other side, Christian, remaining. But she understood that. She knows it's an important part of it, because if you're going to devote your life to something, you need to make sure that stands up to even your own questioning. Otherwise, it won't stand up to anyone else's. So it didn't stand up to mine, and so far still doesn't. But my grandma was able to say, huh?
I said, I'm there with you.
Yeah. I mean, I don't. Every now and then, I'm like, okay, this seems a little too coincidental for me to believe in like chaos and that kind of stuff. But yeah. Anyway, the source material is a whole nother story. But my grandma was able to just say like, okay, well, I might not know any advice to give you, but I'll listen to you. And that helped me work out stuff
That's,
like that.
yeah.
It was huge.
Mm-hmm.
And just knowing that someone's going to sit there and not judge me and not even offer advice, just give me the opportunity to speak to another human being I know loves me unconditionally about my problems. It gives me a chance to like if I have to articulate it, that I could probably pinpoint what it is, instead of just living in this cloud of sad feelings, not knowing how to do it. If you have to try to say, well, here's how I feel, then you're like, oh, I probably feel like that because of this. Then you can take steps to solve stuff. And then you realize
Right.
something you can't fix, then you turn your attention elsewhere, something like that. But yeah, so being able to have someone to talk to about that was absolutely critical for me.
Yeah. And so your answer kind of reinforces an idea that I have. And I've seen it mostly with men in my life, friends, family, significant others, where I think a really important piece of self-discovery includes looking at your childhood, looking at your parents, and the men that I'm thinking of in my life, they almost like think it would be, I think that they feel that it would be disrespectful to like be like, to basically come up with reasons that they struggle as a person, some of it being from their parents. And it's not always like so directly, like from what you said, your parents are lovely people. Like, obviously, we've been talking for a few minutes, but it doesn't seem like there was any overt abuse or anything like that.
No.
But I think we do have to go even deeper than that and say, okay, but what did my parents do for my emotional and mental health? And sometimes the absolute best parents on paper, the one that is always there for you, the one that took you everywhere, picked you up from everywhere, food every night, nice home environment, no yelling, no screaming, no hitting. But did they ask you ever how you were feeling? Did they give you space to talk about emotions? How did they deal with their own struggles? Did they talk about that in front of you? And I think sometimes people have a hard time saying, oh, yeah, they lacked a little bit there, and that's probably why I have had a hard time doing the same things. But people want to say, no, my parents were great, and how dare you even ask me about my parents? And it's like, they can be literally incredible, but still not have given you all the tools and been some of the reason that now you're struggling in whatever way.
Oh, for sure. And you definitely just called me out because I totally just did that. I'm definitely a little apologetic about it for sure. But yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. Like I can still look back on things that happened, not like occurrences, but like the methods I was raised. I can look back and see, okay, well, this may have been lacking. This was lacking some, but I can still say like, no, it was intentional. They're doing their best the entire time.
Exactly.
For sure. So like, they're not, the two things can be true at once. There can be some things that may have benefited me emotionally. There can also be true that they did their damnedest and they still did a great job.
Exactly.
So love you, Mom.
Hi, Mom. Sorry. You. But that took me a long time because in therapy, from a young age, I was like, oh, my dad's the problem all day. Let me sit here and type on my dad. I could talk for hours about my dad. And literally, okay, I've been going to therapy since I was 11 or 12. The first time I stopped to think, oh, in what ways did my mom's patterns affect me, was literally to God a few months ago. And I was like, oh, I was shocked at myself. I was like, how dare I? Because my mom's a perfect angel. Like,
right. Yeah, you get stuck in those patterns.
Girl.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I had to, there was a very specific pattern and behavior that I have been playing out for years now. And when quarantine gives you like way too much time for thinking. Oh, and when I tracked it back, I was like, oh no, it's because my mom used to do that thing.
Yeah.
And I was like, but that's why we have to be open to like reflecting on those things, because it literally does not change my obsession with my mom, not even a little.
Right.
But it literally helps me so much because now I can be like, oh shit, I'm literally doing that thing because of this. And now I can identify why I did it. Now I can work on how to fix it. Whereas if I kept saying, no, my mom was perfect and never did anything. No, she is an angel. I might not have like gotten to that point.
Understanding where it comes from is really important for me too. Because if I have like certain like inclination towards something, I'll stop and be like, oh, like, why did I have that thought? Like, am I a monster? Am I just inherently bad? But if I can identify, oh, I learned that behavior potentially from somebody else. Okay, well, I see where that came from. Then I can trace it back further usually even. And then once I understand what's going on, okay, well, I'm not a complete piece of shit. I just have these influences in my life.
Exactly. Your motorcycle accident, did you have issues from that because of like a TBI or because of like just like recovering from it?
I think it was mostly TBI related. I think it was mostly traumatic brain injury. I have retrograde amnesia from it. And I mean, about a year of the physical therapy was really tough, but I don't really have, I think it taught me a lot. Like I got something really good out of that because the entire time I was really upset about, okay, well now I'm going to be like a year off my plan. I'm going to be a paramedic later than I wanted to be. So I was almost done with the EMT school when it happened. So then I had to, recover, then start all over again. So I'm like, man, I'm like a year behind my plan. I was really distraught. And then after that year of like getting to the point like I could barely move my left shoulder at all. Like my jaw was wired shut. I got plates all over the place.
Ugh.
And yeah, I can't have MRIs. That's probably nice though. I don't like MRIs. But
yeah, no, that's not a good time, but
yeah, it's not a party. But being able to like overcome those physical challenges like taught me a lot because I played a lot of sports, but I've never been athletically gifted or really inclined to do a whole lot of athletic stuff. So I've always been kind of average, abled, nothing spectacular, a physical specimen anyway. But so then that taught me like, okay, well I can do a lot more than I think I can.
Mm-hmm.
So that was huge for me. So I'd say I got a lot good out of that. I'm fortunate. I feel that I don't have like vivid memory of the accident. Everything I know about it's just secondhand sources,
Story. Yeah.
and that kind of thing.
That's
And
probably for the best.
it's I'm not upset about it. Yeah,
Yeah.
so that part's fine. But I think I noticed a couple years ago I started having like real bad mood swings and like then I had like no sex drive at all and like it just seemed like a lot of hormones were just totally out of whack and I couldn't figure
Right.
out why. And then I started listening to I think it was I know it was one of Joe Rogan's podcasts,
I was gonna
but
say he
he
talks about
had
TBI all the time.
right. So he had I think it was Andy Stump. Like maybe I think it was the Navy SEAL who is like a extreme sports guy now. One of them, he's got like an entire SEAL team that comes on his show all the time.
Yeah.
One of them was talking about like traumatic brain injuries and what like the chemical processes that happen within the brain, how the hormone levels can change, and you can think you're just totally messed up. And then like they went on to say like um, the number one cause of TBI is like jet skiing or like car accidents. So like minor stuff just jostles the
Crazy.
brain right the wrong way.
Right.
I'm like, oh well, if that can cause it, then I'm definitely fucked with that for sure. Just riddled
Yeah.
with it. So I'm like, well, fuck. So then I started identifying it. I'm like, okay, let's try some different vitamins, different supplements, maybe try to ease that out a little bit. Do some more working out. Probably get low testosterone or something because of it. And then once I was recognizing that, started putting stuff in motion, it started getting a lot better. There's some circumstantial stuff there as well, but and the point I started having symptoms, I'd already had a bit of unrecognized like depression and PTSD from working as a paramedic those past years that I hadn't been dealing with. And I
Yep.
really knew how to deal with. So, like we always had the thing with our friends, like, oh yeah, we'll go out, have some drinks, talk about some bad calls, but it was always in a very very machismo kind of way. Even though we're
Oh yeah, and even like
thinking,
maybe laughing it off or
right, yeah. So every now and then we get to the point where, and it was a sad thing too, because it was always coupled with alcohol, because that's the only
yeah.
way to get to the point where we're comfortable sharing this kind of stuff. And then we're real drunk, then we're crying and making a mess and puking all over the carpet. And then we wake up, we don't remember anything, we feel like shit. It's not a good cathartic experience. We don't do anything with it.
Right. You
And
weren't like, wow, I feel
if
great now.
anything, we dug all that up for no one to really comprehend or nothing to heal past it. Now it's just sitting there at the surface on top of our hangover.
Right.
So it's just a recipe for disaster. So that's what I was doing. My methods were terrible.
Yeah.
And yeah, I didn't start recognizing the emotional aspect of it and how really, really important that was until probably a couple of years ago. but I didn't start acting on it and being vocal about it until really the end of last year.
And at any point during this journey or now, are you in therapy?
I was for a bit. Yeah, I was. I went and saw a counselor for a while, and it was good. We didn't jive really, really well. He's a super cool guy, but it was a referral because I didn't have money to be able to
Yeah,
really be picky. But he taught me some good stuff, and he did get a few. You can get some nuggets of wisdom from anybody for sure. And it
sure.
was definitely just having someone that I didn't know that I could talk to who wouldn't give me the bullshit, like false feeling reinforcements, like, oh no, you're great, blah blah. Well, look at this, look at that. Because you assume, even though it's genuine from these people, you assume like, well, you have to say it.
Right.
So going to someone and getting the reinforcement that I am doing the right things, I'd show up and be like, hey, here's what's bothering me. I'm just a clinical nerd. I'd be like, all right, hey, so here's what's bothering me. Here's why I think it's bothering me. Here's my plan to start fixing it or addressing it, and so on and so forth. And every now and then he'd be like, just stop and feel what you're feeling for a minute, dude. I'd be
I
like,
know. That's how I am. Like, I have a
ah,
plan.
feels. This is not, it's not a Pixar movie. I don't want to cry right now.
Yeah.
But so it was definitely, it was like counseling was even though it was a short time for me, it was extremely valuable and taught me a lot of really good healthy coping mechanisms.
Are you a paramedic now?
I'm a paramedic now. I'm not working 911. I left 911 last December.
Okay. So do you deal with any kind of
I
trauma now?
don't, not very, very rarely. So what I do now is mostly, I was doing event standby until the apocalypse began. So
Okay.
for the event standby, there's potential for traumatic things to happen, but for the most part, people get headaches or they got blisters on their feet, that kind of stuff. So it's pretty low acuity for the most part. And so that was a much more chill environment. 'Cause, I mean, I would spend 12 hours sitting around the convention center, and I've handed out a few band-aids, some ibuprofen. It was good for me to like relax and still. Because I mean, I don't have a like college degree or anything. I got a diploma that I barely got from high school, and
Yeah.
then a bunch of technical certificates. So fortunately, there's a lot more paramedics can do now than before because they realize we're trained in so many different things. They can use a lot of different roles. So now I got to the point where I'm a CPR instructor. I do clinical research, contracting, and do like freelance medic work. Sometimes I'll take jobs where I do long distance transports, whether it be by plane or like stretcher vans. So it's still working in my role as a caregiver, but it's not the really high acuity, high stress environments. I mean, it could be a high
Right.
acuity, but it's not constant chaos. I have time to breathe and make sure my mind's right.
Did you see a lot of guys that you worked with that you were like, he's probably not doing great, or
Like who thought that I wasn't doing great, or that
no,
I
who
looked at
you
them
think
and
they're not doing great?
yes, and actually, once I left, because I publicly talked about why I left and what my journey had been, and I like goes to depression and PTSD, and like I'm tired of wanting to kill myself. So
Hmm.
I'm stepping out. I'm gonna try to bring some balance back to my life. Because my entire identity was wrapped into being a paramedic. I was like, okay, well, I'm valuable because I am a paramedic. Because I have this job, and I was the one thing I'll brag about is I was a good paramedic. But that
Yeah.
was my entire life. That's what I had to be because well, plus there's the whole mind fuck of me thinking I'm on borrowed time from the motorcycle accident from surviving that. Everyone always told me, oh, you're safe for a reason. There's this, there's that. So then I'd go out there and respond to motorcycle accidents that were far less severe than mine, but with fatal outcomes.
Hmm.
Like, well, and that just tied into the is God real or not? Well, I'm like, well, what? Like, if you are, like, what the fuck?
Right.
You
What's
say to
that mean?
me, these people are dying on me left and right. Like, why? What's my purpose? It feels like I'm
Right.
not living up to it. So living with that kind of guilt and pressure on you. And then with that, it's like, well, why am I here? And this person's like, this guy's a dad. These got kids. Like, I don't have a goldfish. People would be sad if I died for sure, but no one's gonna physically suffer
Right.
necessarily. So I'd be really mad about the scales being out of balance. These cosmic scales that we just make up on our heads for whatever weird reason. I'd be like, well, I have to write it. I have to get it right. So every time I couldn't get a save, really, really hit me hard, and I carried that shit for years. And then add on top of that, a perfect recipe for disaster with like the hormone stuff happening to me. I was in a bad place with the job I was at the time. It's just a perfect storm for just like, boom, everything at once: depression, PTSD, anxiety attack. I'm like, oh, this is what I've been treating all these years. As I'm like, pulse is like 200, and I'm like, I'm sitting here. Why?
Literally. And you're
Yeah.
like, I'm gonna die, and you have no explanation. You
Right.
just can only tell everyone,
Right.
listen, I know I look fine, but I'm going to die right now.
Yeah. So
And
like,
everyone's like,
I've had patients that I've had tons of them, and I've had a very close friend of mine's an EMT who's experienced this before too. So he was really the first one when I was first learning about it to really break it down and like really make me understand the best I could what was going on. So like I knew the right things to do, the right things to say, and I knew how to treat it, but I didn't know what it felt like. And then I finally had one, and I was like, oh fuck, I get it. I definitely get it.
Yeah, I've taken myself to the hospital twice and been like, I'm having a heart attack. And they're like, and I'm
Yeah.
like, yeah, it's true. I'm
And
having
for
a
a
heart
while, I
attack.
criticized people that would do that. I'm like you're fine, sit down and breathe, you know. And I was such a dick about it. I mean, I wasn't openly to them, but like in my head, I
No,
would
you just
think,
don't know.
I would think like I understand it can be debilitating, but like look what's going on.
No,
And
you
then
absolutely cannot understand it until you've experienced it. And at the
yeah,
same
because
time, it's not that I want anyone to
yeah,
know, but it also sucks when no one knows.
yeah. Well, that's the even bigger reason it's so good, important to be vocal about stuff like this, especially like the overwhelming like sense of depression you can feel where you just feel isolated and useless for whatever reason it is. Like, it doesn't matter, like we all dig our holes with different tools and from different areas, but we're all in the same kind of holes. When you're in the hole, you feel a lot of the same things. And even though like I had a friend talk with me the other day, we sat and talked for a long time. We both got to this place from different things, but just being able to communicate, being like, hey, I get it, you know. I'm hopefully, I'm sorry you're feeling it too, but I'm happy I can be here for you.
When I did my, I made a whole episode about like when I first started experiencing anxiety and then my panic attacks that I had. And I had so many people message me word for word the same exact stories. And like something that happens to me personally when I have panic attacks is like an overwhelming feeling of fainting.
Mm.
And it's happened to me literally over like it's been about like 6 years since I started experiencing anxiety. So genuinely, I'm comfortable saying it's happened at least a couple hundred times.
Oh man.
And I've obviously never fainted. Physiologically, you won't faint because you're actually elevated. You're not,
You're
but
super hyped
there's
up.
no convincing you in the moment. I've
Oh
been through it
no.
200 times, but if it happens tomorrow, I'm going to be like, this time I'm going to faint. It's going to happen. It's happening. Today's the day.
Right.
And
So
I do this to myself every time. And I'm like, bitch, it's never happened.
yeah, I've had one really debilitating one. But then I've noticed them starting a lot. 'Cause I figured out, well, 'cause I went back and analyzed that moment like crazy because I'm a friggin' nerd. And I'm like, okay, well,
No, it's good.
what was I doing that morning? What was how was I feeling? So I remember like going to the firehouse that day and being like a little just like on edge, you know. Like I was just like, I just had like a weird feeling. It's like super ominous going to your job as a paramedic, having a weird feeling in your gut. You're just like, oh no, like what's gonna happen?
Yeah.
So that of course built up some of the anxiety too. But then by like noon, like we'd had no calls. We're just hanging out. It's a glorious day, or there's nothing going on. I'm just freaking out in the bunker. I'm hoping no one sees me. And then so I started realizing that actually, so I almost had at the beginnings of an anxiety attack a couple of days ago, where I start pacing around. I start fidgeting a lot. Usually I'm playing with pens or something like that. I just can't sit still. Like I'll be tapping on things. Like it's like that annoying kid in class all day. So
Oh,
you
I have
realize
something in
now.
my hand right now.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
constantly like,
Well, I keep fidgeting in my seat. I'm moving back and forth, and like I can't. Like, my hands keep moving. Otherwise, I'm drinking this impulsively. It's just water. But yeah, like I have to
I
just be
feel
able
you.
to move around, and that's why I saw I was doing those things, and I'm like, wait a minute. Felt my heart rate like 160, and I'm like, okay, all right, let's take some steps. So I went back down to the office I was in, sat down. I'm like, okay, what's real around you? What's concrete? Okay, is there anything you're
Yeah.
actually worried about? Are there any actual threats? No, I'm safe. Okay, let's dig in a little more. But that's like my process now. I do that like
Yes. Good job.
couple times a week for sure. I'm like, all right,
Yeah.
Spidey sense, what is it?
Yeah. And it's usually absolutely nothing. And you're like,
Fucking shit, nothing.
yeah. Yeah. So the first time I went, it just, the whole point of my podcast, like from the beginning, has always
Plug
been
that,
to
by
just,
the way. You've mentioned it a couple of times now. Make sure you plug it.
it's called Let's Fucking Talk. And it's on Apple, Spotify, Google Play. I don't know what the fuck Google Play is, but It's
Yeah, I don't
there.
think I have any. I'm on there. I don't think I've had any downloads at all
I'm
there,
like, it's there. Yeah, I don't think anyone has listened to mine on there either.
but
But the reason that it's just so important to talk about is because sometimes it's shocking when you show up at a hospital and then they treat you like you're there for drugs. And I'm like, huh? I'm like, no, no,
right.
no. Listen, I'm going to die.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I need you. And they literally gave me Benadryl to put me to sleep.
Yeah.
And they're
Yeah.
like, you're not getting anything besides Benadryl. And I'm like, I didn't come here with like, I don't know what I need because I'm dying. So I don't know
Right. Yeah.
I don't know what the cure is. I didn't come here and say, I didn't even mention pain. There was nothing had to do with pain meds, nothing. So that was just, and that was probably the worst one I've had, like physically, because I just let myself fall down the rabbit hole. I was like uncontrollably shivering. My teeth were like, I was like, like, and I was making like audible noise and I couldn't stop it. And this was all a panic attack. Nothing was happened to me physically. So it was just so strange. And then the second time I took myself to a hospital, I was like, hi, I'm here because I'm having a heart attack. And the lady was laughing and she was like, I do not mean to laugh at you. She was like, the one thing I can tell you is that I'm almost 99% sure you're not having a heart attack. And she said, have you ever experienced anxiety? And I was like, yeah, but this is not that. And she was like, it probably is that. And she like talked me through a panic attack. So finally there was like a medical professional who helped me. And mind you,
Right.
that was just the triage nurse. When I got into the hospital and spoke to the actual doctor, I'm super honest in life. So when I roll up to a hospital or a doctor, if you ask me if I use drugs, I'm going to tell you that I smoke weed frequently.
And we appreciate
So
that. Just tell us.
I'm like, if it can help you, if that's somehow contributing. And the second I told the doctor that, she wrote me off and she was like, okay, well, don't come here if that's what you're doing. And I was like, nah. I'm like, this is a separate experience. I'm
Yeah,
like,
the two aren't related. I can probably assure you the two are not related.
right.
A massive
So,
heart rate, rapid breathing, and cannabis usually don't tie together.
right. So I'm like, it's just crazy when like medical professionals let you down and you're like, I literally came here because I feel like I'm dying. Like I'm
Yeah.
fucking scared and you're being a bitch. It's
Right. And like,
not,
well, who am I gonna feel safe with now? Like, I went to you to try to find some safety and security, and then you dismiss me,
yeah.
So it's so tough because you get a lot of people that do come in and bullshit you, especially for pain meds and stuff like
Oh,
that.
for sure.
But if someone has like symptoms of anxiety, whether I think they're faking it or not, I don't dismiss it. I'm like, okay, well, I can treat it in ways that don't always require meds. At least for my short-term purposes, I can talk to you like you're a freaking human. I can be like,
Right.
okay, well, tell me what's going on. Usually just talking and being another human. I mean, it's intimidating when you have like gear, firefighters, cops sometimes around, like all these people standing over you being like, what's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? If you're having anxiety, it's just going to increase it like crazy. So I'd
100%.
always try, what I would always do, if someone I thought was having anxiety and they weren't like a physical threat to me, I'd be like, well, hey, let's just go to my office. We'll talk. Pointing at the ambulance. Go to my office. We'll talk. We'll get these guys out of there if you're comfortable with that, and we'll just see what's going on. Okay, I'll take your vital signs. I always tell them what I'm doing. That way,
Right.
like, okay, well, he's doing something.
Yeah.
But the real thing I'm doing, like, I'm doing bullshit stuff. I'm like pulling band-aids on and off. I'm doing like temperatures I don't actually need. But I'm just doing things to make them think I'm helping. And while I'm talking, they're like, okay, this guy gives a shit.
Exactly.
So I try to treat, like I realize like you have to treat the mind and the body. And it's such a hokey thing to say, but it's so true. I've seen paramedics do the exact same interventions on very, very similar patients with the same thing going on. One had great bedside manner, one didn't, and they had vastly different outcomes. Guess which one did better?
Right. And so when you're doing paramedic school, how often was mental health talked about from both angles for people you're treating and like you guys?
Not nearly enough. Not
Yeah.
nearly enough. There was definitely more emphasis on like psychiatric emergencies, and they dug into some of that, but it wasn't really very in depth. It was basically a chapter out of the textbook that's full of stuff, and the pace of paramedic school is so fast. In
Yeah.
Florida, it's a year long. It's so fast. As soon as you learn one thing, you pass the test, and you lose it because you're cramming for the next thing. Like it's
Yeah.
very, very
It's gone.
hard to retain information on that fast pace. And like if you're
Right.
working full time, and school and your clinical hours you have to get in. Like it's like time management is the thing you learn the most in paramedic school, really.
Yeah.
So it's hard to retain that. So the little bit they do touch on just wash away real fast because you're not as worried about, okay, well, this guy's dad maybe beat him, or maybe this psychological condition comes from that. You're like, okay, well, which one's gonna kill me if I run into it, and how do I
Yeah.
stop it? Like
Yeah.
which drug do I how much drug do I give to stop him from killing me, but I don't kill him too. That's pretty much the gist of the mental health side. At least when I was in school, that long ago, a while ago. But I hadn't thought about it in a while, and I'm like, oh, I'm so old.
I know, I feel like I have the same thing. I'm like, what year is it? What?
Right? It still amazes me that I'm sitting here and talking about my feelings with somebody I barely know. Even that, like what
So
weird
good.
testament to that is, isn't it weird?
No, I love it.
Yeah. So
And I
it's
feel like podcasting is like, that's happening a lot because a lot of times you obviously, maybe in the beginning you'll do like your friends as guests, but then eventually you're like, okay, well, I need like someone new. So
don't
you
have
end
that
up,
many friends.
yeah. So you end up having random conversations with people. Like I've had 3 guests that I've not spoken to prior.
Mm-hmm.
And I jump in there like I'm asking. So
Well, wait, so you're saying the host of a podcast called Let's Fucking Talk isn't shy?
right.
Couldn't have guessed.
Yep.
But then that's fun. Like, well, sometimes it's easier to jump into stuff with strangers too, especially topics like this, especially like versus friends you've known for a long time. Because I mean, the conversation we're having now, like I'm just talking. I'm out. Like, I think about my parents. Like I haven't even dealt with that in a while, you know. So like it's a lot easier sometimes to share stuff like this than it is with someone like because you already have like a preconceived idea of what you want them to think about you. Or what you think, or if you're like me, then like I adapt to what I think my friends need. So I have this really toxic savior complex where I want to help everyone no matter what. So I'm like a fucking personality chameleon sometimes. So when I'm talking with someone I don't know, that I'm like, cool, I can just be whatever the fuck me is right now. And then, if they don't like me, all right, nothing's been invested. Sorry to waste your time. But
Yeah.
And it's a little cynical maybe, but it's really is. I mean, it's disarming in a way too.
Yeah. No, it's true.
All right, so what like prompted you to do the podcast? Was there a certain moment that got you into it? I mean, you also talk about mental health, and was this what prompted it?
So in like 2016 was the first time I started really considering a YouTube channel, and a couple of times I had set up a camera. I've never done that. So I'm like, I just want to see what happens. And all of a sudden I was just the weirdest. I'd be like, hey guys, welcome to my channel. Like, I'd watch it back and be like, is she okay? Like, I'm so normally just like good at talking. And if there's all of a sudden when there was a camera, I was like, I'm like, okay, this is not good. And like, all my friends were like, you have to, like, this is what you're supposed to be doing. Like, you have to do it. And I'm like, no, you haven't seen the video. Like, something goes wrong and it's not good. And then podcasting just started getting more popular. Joe Rogan is my religion. And
we bonded over that for sure.
Oh, he's just, he's so good. He's literally the perfect person. But anyways.
I want him to adopt me and be my best friend.
Okay, so I always say he's my dad and my daddy. It's confusing.
Yeah, no, it's fine. I get it, though.
I'm like, anything that you want to be to me, I'll take it. I don't care what it is.
I'm there for it. Absolutely. I'll clean the sweat off your dumbbells. I don't care. That's what your DNA
100%. So when I saw podcasting, I was like, oh, I can talk and I don't have to make a video and have that thing happen to me that happens. And you know how humans are. You talk about ideas and then you never do it. So I talked about the podcast forever. I bought like probably 3 different websites of really? I would think of a name of like something. And then I was like, oh, I'm going to make a blog. I don't know. I was just reaching for something.
What were some of the name rejects? So Let's Fucking Talk was the one that got the spot. What were the
so the one that I was most stuck on before that was called 20 something.
Okay.
Because I was obsessed with the idea that your 20s are so hard and no one talks about it, and kind of the idea that like when you're in your 20s you might still go to like your parents for advice, and your parents, I don't know if they fucking forgot or if it was just different, but they're like, there's nothing to stress about. But like your life is so stressful, so you're like, wait, that doesn't make sense. It's not stressful because I fucking don't know how to be an adult. They don't teach you anything in school. What the fuck is a tax? I don't have enough money to pay my rent. I'm a dumb bitch. I bought an apartment that I could not afford. Like, just a million things that, like, I didn't, like, think that anyone talked about. Everyone talks about their college years. Like, it was, like, so fun and carefree. And I'm like, I'm gonna kill myself. I'm not good. Mentally, financially, nothing. So that was, like, an idea that I was like stuck on for a long time, but again, did actually no action. I did not write anything. I used to randomly think of things and write them in my notes. Nothing ever happened. And I think I've been doing my podcast 7 months now, and literally I do my podcast on an app called the Anchor app. And it's all done like over the phone. It's like very easy.
Really?
And I did a little research and I found that app. So I downloaded it on my phone. Again, I had the app on my phone probably for like 6 months, just hanging out, just there. And it literally started because one day a person from my past.
Okay, old person, I get you.
You know, texted me something so stupid, and it was a pattern that I've seen men from my past do over and over and over. And I was like, I had to vent, and my best friend was busy at work, and I was like, I'm gonna make a podcast. I literally picked up my phone, and that is literally my first episode. Like, it is, you can listen to it. And it's just me being like,
going to 100%.
And it's just me ranting about this person and the pattern that I saw that I think everyone can relate to, because at least one person has done it to them. Like, people who come and go out of your life and like expect you to remain the same for like literally years and years and years. And then when you don't, they're mad, and then they get like dramatic and they say stupid shit. So that's literally how it started. And then once I made the first one, I was like, well, I guess I gotta do this every Tuesday.
Right now I'm committed.
Because I did research when I was just thinking about it, and, you know, researching like how to make a successful podcast. And
all the Google searches,
yeah. And because Google can plan your whole life for you.
Allegedly,
and the thing that I saw the most, which I agreed with, and Joe Rogan talks about it all the time, is just being like consistent. Like, even if it's every other week, even if it's once a month, like, let it be something that people know. Oh, every Tuesday she does that, or every 13th of the month she does that. So I wanted to do it weekly, so I was like, oh, well, now I have a fucking podcast, apparently.
Yeah. See, that's the thing that's hardest for me, is the consistency. I was just
Sorry,
doing
my cat feeder is going off, and it has my voice on it, so if you hear anything weird, that's what it is. Can you hear it?
I can hear him. I'm trying to figure out, what's it say? Are you calling your cat on a recording whenever the feeder dispenses food?
Saying, hi, mama, come get your food.
Does it just go off like an alarm till the cat comes up and eats?
Yeah.
Oh my God, I didn't know that was a thing.
Hilarious. Well, it dispenses food. It was a Christmas gift from my dad so that he didn't have to watch my cat when I went out of town. Is essentially what that is.
This is my favorite episode ever.
Podcast gold.
Oh, we were killing it. This was not any of the Google searches I found, but I feel like we're doing it right.
No. But anyways, yes, that's how my podcast started. And yeah, it's literally like my favorite thing in my life, literally.
Yeah, well, I'll start dreading a deadline coming up, like, oh, it's almost be Thursday again, I gotta do one, like, what am I gonna talk to, what am I gonna do? And then I sit down and start talking, and I'm like, oh, this is fun. Like
Yes.
it's just talking.
Same.
Like we're just having conversation. You know, I mean, it's
And it
weird.
definitely was like easier in the beginning in a way because I mean, I had a list of topics. And for the first, I would say, for the first like 3 to 4 months, I was always recording like 2 and 3 weeks ahead of time because I had so much to say. And then honestly, it is now I'm like, uh-oh. Like I'll get a week away and I'm like, wait, what the fuck else is there to talk about?
Right. Yeah.
But
So
it always works.
I have all these ideas. Like I'll write down like, oh, I'll do, because I feel super awkward doing like a solo episode where it's just me talking.
Oh wow, that's me.
It's so hard for me to do that. So like I have these ideas. I'm like, oh, well, I can talk about this. But then like if I'm gonna do that, then I'm like, well, now I need an outline, and now I gotta do this, and how am I gotta plan all this stuff. And I'm
No.
like, no, because like every time I'll randomly just finally work up the courage and like make like a Facebook Live video, it gets like more attention than anything else I do. And it's just me just spitballing. Then I'm like, oh my God, at some point I'll realize that every now and then I'm not just a rambling idiot. Or maybe I am and that's what they feel, but either way, figure
it's
it out
working.
one way. They don't hate it. People don't hate me. It's doing something.
Some of the first, because I told everyone, especially the first people that were listening, you can give me the rudest feedback you have. Like, I want to know. Like, I don't want to be the person who just hears good things and then really my podcast is annoying. Something's wrong with the audio. Like, I told people, like, if something sounds weird, if I talk weird, like, please. And one person literally said, it sounds like you're recording on the toilet, like there's a bathroom echo. And I'm like, perfect. I'm absolutely not in the toilet, but like now that's why I sit in my closet and record. So like I was down for all of that. But one of the compliments I kept getting, which like honestly really like pushed me and gave me more confidence, was your like stream of thought is so good. Like you're talking just literally in the beginning it was like always 20 minutes. Now it's usually like 45 minutes. And like you make sense. And I'm like, I was thinking that I probably was all over the place, but that people were just coming along with me and they were like, oh, okay, she's fucking crazy, but like it's fine.
Yeah.
But then when someone tells you like, no, you sound fine, you're like, oh.
Right? Like, okay. All right. Well, I'm actually, yesterday should have been 2 Thursdays ago. I didn't do one because I was getting ready to leave. And there's some timing conflicts, but then I didn't do one yesterday. I was gonna do a solo one to release yesterday, but then I bitched out and didn't do it. And so now I'm like, all right.
Now I'm gonna force you to do one. I'm gonna be.
I know.
Following up and being like, where is it?
Well, I'm glad because I was about to be like, hey, just make me do one.
Yes.
And now you already said it, so I'm like, cool. It's out of my control now. Now I have to.
You know what I feel like a good place to start is like I call them on my podcast a story time. So something where there's not really something to think about, but like, I don't know if you've ever delved into your accident or if we all have a story. The time whatever the hell, if it's a funny story, a sad story, but like, that's easy because it's just a story. Like you don't have to, there's nothing to think about. It's there.
That's good. Yeah. Cause I seem to practice. I have to stop myself like mid-sentence sometimes. So I'll just start rambling really fast. My mouth can't keep up with my brain. And that's been like a big challenge for me a lot of times throughout my life, especially when I first got on the road as an EMT or as a medic, because I'd be talking to patients and I'm in Florida, so most of my patients are going to be elderly. So hard of hearing. So you got this young kid, looks like he's just barely finished puberty here, showing up when you're having a heart attack. And then he's like, where's the pain? How long did it start again? You got any medicines? What's going on? Like, it's a little much. So I'd be like, hey, what's going on? So and even now then I'll get distracted and I'll get excited and I'll just keep rambling. So I have a weird cadence every now and then, but I mean, I communicate effectively.
I say try it, and I bet you'll get surprisingly good feedback where you're like, oh.
That or I'm going to suck, but I'll keep doing it, and then I'll start getting good feedback.
No, I have so much faith.
I am so excited. Okay, I'll definitely do that then. I like
that
idea.
Be waiting
That's awesome.
For it.
Well, plug your podcast again. So I think that's a perfect way to wrap this up. And I don't think this will be the last time we talk to each other.
No, and I need you to come on mine too.
I would be delighted.
So it's called Let's Fucking Talk, spelled that way. You can type it in anywhere. That's also my Instagram handle. Again, just spelled out the way it is. So that's it.
Awesome. Well, I can't wait to listen to it and talk to you some more. And yeah, just make sure you send me all that stuff over. I'll make sure it's posted on all the descriptions on YouTube and
Awesome. Thank
Google
you.
Play, even though no one's going to read it there. But
Well,
everywhere
I
else
don't know
they
what a
do read
Google
it,
Play is, but
they'll be able
yeah.
to find it. Good. Anyway, all right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. It was nice talking to you.
It is my pleasure. See you soon.